Hi, this is Big Guy DIY Robert coming to you with another video. Going to do some work on the rear end of this truck. Let's go to the back of my truck and take a look. So this is the back of my 2014 F-150. Someone in the parking lot managed to hit me, damaging my sensor, pushing the bumper into the body. And it was a good hit. So the distance from this edge here to out here is roughly 2 inches. So in the process of damaging my right rear corner panel, the tailgate here, as we open, touches, but very, very lightly. But it is beginning to show right there. It's touching. So this is not the first time my rear end has been hit. It's kind of annoying, to be honest with you. What's annoying is people not taking the responsibility. If you hit someone, leave a note, say, I'm sorry I hit you, here's my contact information. Instead, they take off. So basically a hit and run. This is, in my household, the third hit and run within the last 8 months. The first hit and run was my son on the highway. A pickup truck rear-ended him, smashing their very expensive mountain bikes. And then the second hit and run was my daughter on the highway again. That was a $7,800 bill to fix that car. I'm not putting this through insurance to have that fixed. Instead, I'm putting on a better bumper. As you can see, the Hammerhead. So this is the next project coming in. It already has the pre-cutouts for my lights. These cutouts here are for the backup sensors. This is for the license plate lights here. And this, which is actually important, this is the access to the spare tire. So your rod would go through here so you can get in there and loosen up the spare tire. This is kind of obvious if you have a license plate bracket or something like that. But yeah, in the pictures, I'll post some pictures in here. The thickness of this piece of metal, the entire thing, is 1/4 inch thick steel. It is treated, as you can see, almost like a rhino liner treatment. The welds are like a row of dimes all the way around, all the corners. I like the fact that it has a step there. And then the back side, there's not much to show on the back side, but this is your back side. So this is the next project. We're going to remove, actually I'm not going to remove it yet. I'm going to buy new sensors. I already bought one. They cost, I think, 50 bucks each on the sensors. So I'll have new sensors, remove my old rigid backup lights, and have those installed. I don't know if this size holds exactly the same or smaller or what. I don't know. We'll find out when we get to that point. The information on this bumper I'll have down in the description. I bought this online. It is very pricey compared to a lot of the stuff you'll see on Amazon. A lot of the stuff on Amazon was made in China, you know, like 600 bucks, 700 bucks. They didn't specify the thickness of the metal, and to me that was important. I wanted a really heavy, thick gauge piece of steel. I wanted the bumper to be one piece, not 2 pieces, not 3 pieces, but one solid piece. And my goal was try to get it made in America. And Made in the USA. So cost for this bumper was, I'll round the numbers up, was $1,600. Then I had taxes on top of that, and then I had special freight shipping on that. There you go. So FedEx had to carry it freight wise, so it was an additional $200 for freight shipping. So total cost, rounding it up, was $1,900, so $1,900 for this bumper. Yeah, it's a lot of money, but for the number of times people seem to hit my pickup truck in the rear end, that's why I stopped taking my hitch ball off, because people just come right up so close and just, you know, bump the back of my truck. So I think when I put this in, they'll be walking away with damage. And I'm also installing a rear view camera just to catch the people who are hitting me. So yeah, so we're gonna get started on this, and we'll time lapse a lot of it. I'll explain, you know, where, if there's parts there where I can explain on the installation, I will do that for sure, and show you what the parts are needed. So first thing I'm gonna do is, like I said, I was gonna get the lights installed and the sensors installed to start it off in the process. And then I'll show you how to take off that rear bumper, since I've done it twice already. Okay, let's get going. So this bumper, as shipped, comes on a pallet. Shipping weight of it is 180 pounds. So I just hung this on my scale. The total weight of this bumper alone is 113.32. What comes in the box with the bumper are your brackets. Your brackets are 8 pounds and a quarter each. It also comes with the hardware, and I guess the plugs are, if you're not going to use the backup sensors, they have these plugs that you can pop in there. And then these pieces here, the plastic inserts, that's for your license plate. This here are your instructions. It also came with, which I didn't know, I guess I didn't quite understand the directions, but it also comes with the lights, flush mounted lights. Now these, technically speaking, this would be my third pair of lights, because I already have flush mounted lights that I installed originally on the truck. Let me grab the first pair that I originally installed. This is the original pair that I installed in the truck. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of corrosion going on that took place. All right. This has been in here for 2 years. No corrosion at all. And I'll point out why, specifically for rigid, and what this is a comparison to of these. Rigid understands the dissimilarities of metal. This is aluminum housing. That is steel. That is steel. When you put aluminum against steel, the aluminum is going to corrode because it is a softer metal than the steel. So through what you call electrolysis, the aluminum begins to disintegrate. The paint comes off and it just fails completely. The way these are held in, stainless steel bolts, but if you look closely at it, see that? It's a nylon washer. That nylon washer is against the top of the head and against this. So this bolt does not touch the outside of this at all. So that's how it's separating the two from a bolt going through into a steel bumper. Also, this is a rubber gasket that comes with the rigid light. This gasket is mounted between the light and the bumper, again, separating the soft metal from the steel. This one did not have any of that. This one does not have it either. There are no nylon washers in here. There are no rubber gasket to separate the two. It does come with a complete wire harness with the battery attachment and you can see here the switch that'll be mounted in your vehicle. I'm not going to use any of this because I already have the wiring in place. No need for that. As for the light, I'm not going to use this because looking at how this is constructed compared to the rigid is a much beefier construction, especially in the back and compared to the fins of the two. So this is just going to be put away. I don't know if I'm going to keep it or resell it, but we're going to stick with the rigid. The rigid understands dissimilarities with metal. So let me just put this back for a moment. The next thing I'm going to change is the hardware. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's a we call valued hardware, but if you look at the end, you get the 3 marks there. That usually stands for a grade 3 or just a plain steel bolt, and it's zinc coated. Where I live, we live in a very heavy salt environment, meaning in the winters, there's a lot of salt and salt brine used on our roadways. These things will rust within a year. So if there's any service that needs to be done, it's going to be difficult to get these undone, say after a year or two, unless they've been coated like crazy with, say, the New Hampshire oil undercarriage spray, or cover with just oil in general. So what I've done today is I went out and bought grade 8 bolts, nuts, and washers. So the price of everything so far, this was $70 just for the bolts, nuts, and washers. The rigid, this is called a D type rigid flush mounted light. They still make it, they still sell it. 260, but don't quote me on that one. 260, but I've had them for 2 years. And they're excellent. They work really, really good on the back of the truck for lighting up the rear end when it comes to loading a boat or unloading a boat or even hooking up to a trailer or anything like that. The other things I've purchased new backup sensors for them. You can buy these on Amazon. This is the one I purchased. I don't think there's a part number on here per se, but made in China, of course. But what are you going to do? If you want the Ford part number, this is on the new one. This I bought directly from Ford. And that's your part number. I've also bought the new housings that the sensors go into. Now, here's the thing. The housings, all 4 are different. And I'll show you how. You look at the hole here, you get 2 notches there. Look at this hole. Notches are different. And far left, notches are different. So, again, I bought these off of Amazon. They are labeled on here. OL stands for outside left. IL stands for inside left. That means this notch here and this notch will match there. Inside right. And this one says OR, outside right. As you can see, the bumper itself has been treated. When I started installing this, you definitely will need a file because from this treatment, it kind of reduces the size of the hole. The notches are not as clean, so you'll have to clean those out. As for the light part, this is fine. You don't have to do any sanding there. For this part, for the plate lights, I don't know. I think they'll just slide right in. But each notch I had to file to get it to work, to get them to fit in. Now, these original bolts for the rigid light were for the original bumper. These are only 3/4 of an inch. They just barely stuck through in the back, so you can get the nuts on here. The nuts originally are just a regular nut, so I added lock washers to them. I'm changing that. The size of this bolt is actually a 1/4-20, but the head is not a 1/4-20. The head is what they call a 10/24. So let me show you here. Here's a 10/24. 1 inch, that's the length of the bolt I am going to. So what I had to do is I couldn't match the throat of the bolt to the head. I had to match the head. That would be closest because on the light, this is seated. So I had to match the size of that seat for this to go in. So let me grab a 10/20 or a 1/4-20 and show you what that looks like. So here is a 1/4-20. You see the difference in the size of the head between them. When the 1/4-20 goes in, obviously the stem is going to fit, but the bolt is the head itself is not going to sit inside this part of the light. Forgot the word. Countersink. There's a countersink here in the light. So the head is too large for it to sit in there. So I'm just dropping it down one size. I've gone from a 3/4 to a 1 inch. And then I've changed my nuts that I'm going to use to a nylock nut. So that way I do not need a lock washer. So all it is just a bolt, the nylon washer, and then I'll have a metal washer on the inside of the bumper with the nylock nut. So, and that's it. So the brackets, when they are bolted into the frame, the other part of the bracket will be here, which is part of your tow hitch right there. So right now, I'm going to work on putting the sensor housings in, finish that up, and then I'm going to remove, or I'm going to install the lights next into this, and then I'm going to start disassembling this, and I'll show you how this disassembles. It's pretty easy. It's if I remember correctly, it's 3 bolts on the right side, 3 bolts on the left side. This top part, it just clips in. It's not bolted in at all. There's holes or slots already pushed, slots in the bumper, and it just pops out, and I'll show you how that's done. And I'll even show it to you underneath if I got good lighting. So I'm going to put this in time lapse and get started. Well, it appears my time lapse is not working. So I got my lights installed. I got my sensor housings installed. Took a bit more filing to get those in there, but they went in. And we got the first part of the bumper off. So let me show you what it looks like. The plastic part. You have these tabs that all go into the slots up here to hold it in all the way across. And then you got tab here in the bottom. This one broke off. Same for the other side, the tabs. So as you can see, with this plastic boot, it's not a full bumper. This is what I call a bumperette. This part here, this plate, this 1/4-inch steel plate, I added because from Ford, they just had this really cheesy piece of metal here, and the thing rusted out, and you couldn't step on the top here. As this was in, you couldn't step here. You just went right down, right through it, because there's no metal underneath there. There's no support. So I installed this plate. It's welded all the way around. I am hoping I do not have to cut this off for the new bumper. I am hoping. We'll find out, sure enough. So I already got rust going through the top of this here. The same for this side. So what there is now, bring this a little closer. I have to get those 3 nuts off right there, and this whole bumper will come off in one shot. So that's what holds this whole thing. There's no support from here around. It's only from here, and that's it. So what I'm going to do is keep the camera rolling while I try to take these off. So I got to put a wrench in the inside, and then on the back side I'm going to use a pneumatic air gun. Let me pause this and we'll start it up again. So, as you can see, I used just a regular right angle ratchet 3/8. Socket was a 22 millimeter to get that off. Now you can kind of see the damage it was done because there's no support on the corners. Nothing there. So here's what the back looks like. So the next thing I have to do is I have to disconnect this here. Is that bottom one too? Yeah, this bottom one here as well, to grab the bumper, or not the bumper, the receiver, to remove the receiver off that. Also, these bolts are being changed out. So these inexpensive like lock rings, really the only thing they do is they just hold the bolt in place. Those got to be removed. There's not even one on the bottom one here. Huh. So that's the next thing. So what I do to get these little thin lock clips that are sitting right here, bend it up with a flathead and just grab some dikes and cut it. On the back side of this, there is a plate that these 3 bolts go through, so you need to save that plate. Actually, no you don't. Look at this carefully. Come on. These suckers are pressed in, so you're not going to reuse this plate. Never mind. Next, it's to reinstall the receiver along with the brackets. I'll show you the brackets. The brackets. So I gotta get set up to do this because I'm doing this by myself. So for installation, the hammerhead bracket, which is you see down here, that and that has to go in between the receiver. So this goes on first, and then the receiver goes over it, and you bolt it in. washer first on a bolt. Washer on the back side. Nut. Then add the rest of your nuts and bolts. And remember, it's 2 washers per bolt. Washer on the bolt first, install it, washer on the back side. All right, the bracket, hammer bracket is an oval hole left to right. So there's adjustments, you know, going this way. So I would not tighten those nuts and bolts up too much because you still want to have play in that bracket. So when you put on the bumper, you can adjust it accordingly. So I'm going to take a little break right now because this is tiring when you're doing it by yourself. And it's muggy as heck outside, so I'll come back to this. Okay, so what I've done is these 3 bolts and those 3 bolts, I've tightened them enough where the receiver's not hanging down. It's up there, but it's not too tight where I cannot move the bracket on both sides. So that way when I get the bracket bolted up on both sides, I can adjust it still. This is going to be the hard part. I'm lifting this up by myself, and then I got to try to through bolt it. So I'm going to start with the right side first, possibly, because the right side is supported a little higher than the left side. So what I meant to say is I'm going to have the right side rest on this block right here, and then bolt the left side up first. And don't forget, this thing is 113 pounds. Okay. Let me catch my breath, explain this one. Let me pause this. Here going in is the bracket. Same on this side. The factory bracket that's attached to the frame comes out. Now, like I said, the holes are elongated, so that bracket can move inside or out here. Same for the other side. So in order to get this centered, you want the bracket to the outside of this on both sides. That way you are able to move it left and right within it. Holy crap, is this thing heavy. I'm not complaining, I'm just saying. So I'm gonna get my 2 bolts in place to hold it. This is just my backup lights. I put the cords up here so they're out of the way. And there we go. So it's held in place. I have to work with the spacing on this. I think I'm all the way in as far as it can go. As for the right side and left side, it looks pretty good. I might lift it up a little because it's sloped down, but the holes on the bracket are elongated this way. When you're putting the bolts through here in the inside, they're elongated front to back, so you can tilt the bumper. So I'll be working on that next. So for tonight, I'm done. Yeah, we will come back on this tomorrow morning and continue hooking this up. So let me give you a little view up close. You can see my spacing here. It goes underneath pretty good. Doesn't hit the tire or anything. So I'll have to get a measuring tape. Get that in there. So what I'm happy is I didn't have to cut that plate down here. Actually, the bumper's probably sitting on that plate I had welded in. But yeah, so can it be done by a single person? Yeah. Do you have to have a strong back? Hell yes. This is not light by any means. So I will be back tomorrow to continue on tightening up the bolts and then getting the wiring and the sensors installed. Okay, here we are the following day. It's been pouring for the last 12 hours. So back at it. I'm supposed to have like a window, like a 6-hour window of no rain. So I'm going to try to finish this up. Let's take a look. So as you can see, I got jack stands on each corner. What I did is when I put this in, the bolts are holding it in place. Okay, all the bolts I put in, but they're not tightened. They're kept loose. This way it leaves me the opportunity to move the bumper left and right so I can get the correct clearance here on both sides. This side's a little closer than I want it to be, but I'm using my measurement from this corner here to the bumper. And right now, I'm exactly 1 inch and 1/16 between the two. As regards to the bumper going up, when I signed off last night, there was a good 2-inch gap here, and that was just too low. So I'm able to lift it up, get it into position, and then I use the floor jacks. And so what I did next is I took a measurement from the front here to this leading edge, and the same thing over here. So this will go forward only so far. So that's the thing, is once I get underneath, do the last bolts, I'm going to start tightening all my bolts up. And yeah, hopefully it doesn't shift on me. I was going to try to do something from the middle like a jack, but my jack and all was not working. So I'm lying on a rubber mat and then my rug on top. So right now I'm going to get underneath. I'm going to be wearing gloves this time. My hands got so covered with oil, I couldn't really get the oil off my hands last night. I had to use I don't know. I don't know what they call it. Some really abrasive, like, sponge in our shower to get my hands cleaned. So let me get the camera set up here. So the bolts, when I get the last two in, I'm going to tighten it by hand because I want to be able to have control of what I'm doing versus using the air gun to do this. Okay, the bumper is bolted in. You can see my spacing as I go across. It is even. You know what? I'm gonna double check something here. Okay, now we're installed. I was off by a 1/4 inch on this side. I can see it with a plain eye. So my distance from the top of the bumper to the bottom of this edge to the tailgate is 4/8 both ways. I got 1" and a 1/16, 1" and a 1/16. Now I'm going to show you what the access looks like underneath. So give me a second here. So here are your 3 bolts. That hold both the bracket, which is this piece here, which is to the bumper. So you got 2 bolts here for the bumper, and then the bracket is sandwiched between the receiver and the frame. Let's see if I can expand this out. There. So to get into this channel, the backside's wide open for the nuts, but my advice is to get to these bolts, use a breaker bar. This is a 3/8 breaker bar, and that way you can get in here all the way up to the top one, still be able to hold the handle. So we are installed. And it's starting to rain. Wasn't supposed to. So I'm going to bring everything in right now before it starts raining harder. Now you can see what it looks like with this stuff off. Obviously, I have to do all the wiring next. I'm not going to film that. I mean, you don't need to see me installing lights or anything like that. I mean, the backup sensors, the brake, the license plate light. But yeah, 5 bolts per side. So the bolts that are used are 1/2" bolts, grade 8, that I switched to. The ones that came in the box were grade 8. The bolts that were holding this original bumper on are only 1/4. It was just 3 of them. That's your whole bumper on the rear end of the truck. One corner and the other corner. And you can see how thin it is. Only an eighth of an inch, if that, compared to 1 1/4. So when I get all the wiring, all the sensors installed, I'll come back and close out the video. Right now I'm gonna take a little rest and let this rain pass. Okay, we are done. So this is what she looks like after all installed. So old bumper, and it's only bolted here, 3 bolts. Nothing supports the rest of this, it just hangs. You can kind of see the difference between the two. This design, there is no, the only thing between the 2 bumplets, or whatever you want to call them, is the hitch. That's it, which I modified. I welded a plate on here so I could step here to get into the truck. That plate I did not have to take off. This fit right over it, so I was pretty happy about that. And then the other side, 3 bolts hold it here, and the rest of it just in the air. No support behind it. So I wanted to talk about these sensors that are in here, the housings themselves. So on those sensors, they are a little tricky, but what they do, or what Hammerhead is doing with the bumper is, even though the steel is 1/4 inch thick, and then the steel that the hang on, This is what your sensors go into. This like grommet, plastic grommet. Plastic grommet itself, here you can see the spacing, is only about 1/8 of an inch. So when it sits into the bumper is between this part and the fascia. Because the new bumper is 1 1/4 or 1/4 inch thick, this will not fit. But what they did is they countersunk the hole from the inside and made it 1/8 of an inch thick. And so there's a lip you can't see unless you look at it carefully on the inside. So when you slide these in, you want to be sure that these here are on the inside of that lip that's in there, and that when you look inside the hole itself, that they're not sticking up. I can do it here. That's, I can push that up. You don't want this sticking up. It has to be flat once it's inside. The reason why is when you reinstall the backup sensors, they will not click into place because of this sticking up. So that took a little time and a little working to get this to go inside the bumper and then get the sensor to stay inside correctly. I actually went through 3 of these because I kept breaking these tabs that hold this in, the bumper itself. So my advice is when you get the bumper, make sure that lip is very, very clean on the inside and that the product that they spray on the bumper is not made it thicker, because then you're going to fight getting those sensors into the grommet housing. And that took me some time. Overall, everything went smoothly. This will probably be about a 3-hour job. This took me a solid 4.5 hours. I'm doing it by myself. It's very heavy, 114 pounds. But yeah, I'm very happy with the outcome of this bumper. I cannot complain at all with it. And that's it. So this is Big Guy Robert signing off. Yeah, any questions about installing this bumper or any comments, rifle them down below. I will leave in the description the name of the company and my rigid lights. If I can find a link for those, I'll leave those in there because they are a really good light overall. And that's it. Give me a thumbs up if this is helpful. And please don't forget to subscribe. It helps out a lot. Thank you.